You can start, Shan.
Okay, good evening and welcome to Tamil Heritage Trust's monthly Heritage Talk. Delighted to welcome all of you today. A very quick reminder of who we are and what we do. So Tamil Heritage Trust was set up back in 2010 with the objective of understanding, appreciating, disseminating, and celebrating the rich and varied heritage of India. Towards this, we conduct a number of programs. The monthly Heritage Talk is our flagship and main staple program. It happens every first Saturday, and post the pandemic, we moved it entirely online. So it's available to a wider audience across India and across the globe. It happens, as I said, every first Saturday of every month at 5:30 p.m. And as you can see from some of these posters here, it has a wide range of topics, from temple architecture to history to various other aspects of heritage. We also have a hybrid and an in-person program here in Chennai, which is on the third Saturdays of every month, where we have a program. This is in Tamil, a talk on heritage issues. We conduct annual seminars. There is a seminar that's called the Pechu Kacheri, which happens in December every year to coincide with the Kacheri or the music season in Chennai, where we take an in-depth look at any one topic over a period of over a weekend. The last one we had was on Vijayanagara in 2022, where we had 10 lectures by scholars over 2 days. We also conduct the Indology Festival, which is again an online program which we started a couple of years ago. And the most recently, in June of this year, we had the Indology Festival on Sagara Sangamam, India and the Sea, where we had 14 scholars across India and elsewhere in the world talk about the fascinating 3,000-year history of and take us on a journey along the coast of India to see the interactions that India has had with several countries in the oceans over the years. All our talks are available for watching at your leisure at our YouTube channel. It's free. We have over 200 plus videos there, which you can access when you want to. We also conduct workshops for people interested in specific heritage issues. We conduct a program called How to See a Temple on a monthly basis, alternating it with How to See a Museum, considering that the Chennai Museum here in Egmore has one of the best collections of bronze icons and other heritage artifacts. We conduct a site seminar where a set of people study a certain site systematically for about 2-3 months and then go there and physically visit the site on a study tour. We give away a couple of awards. One of the awards is the PhD Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award. This again has been happening for the last 3 years. The 4th edition of the award has just concluded. The jury has just concluded its session in selecting the award winner, and we will be making an announcement shortly. This award is to recognize exceptional individual contributions towards understanding, dissemination, and preservation of Indian heritage, and it is named after our co-founder, Professor Swaminathan, who, as you can see from the photographs, where he is giving away the award itself. The award that we have is a unique one. We have the V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award, which is a one-of-a-kind award, essentially to recognize the work of in the field of epigraphy and exclusively for epigraphists. And most recent winner of this award for 2023 was Dr. P.V. Krishnamurthy, a Kannada epigraphist, and he was awarded this award on July 15th by our chief guest, Sri N. Gopal Swami. Upcoming events, tomorrow we start our next session of our next batch of teacher training program called Alamaravai, exclusively for teachers to help them in their efforts to spread the word and the message of heritage to students, communities, heritage clubs, and so on in their schools. We have a second batch starting tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact. If you'd like to join our mailing list, please do write into admin@tamilheritage.in, and we'll make sure that you don't miss any of our programs as we conduct them in the next few months. And with that, we come to today's program, and I'm delighted to welcome Professor Prashanthi Narangoda. She is from the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation to speak on Buddhist art and architecture of Sri Lanka. Professor Narangoda is Professor of Fine Arts in the Department of Fine Arts at the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka. He's also currently the Director of the National Center for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, or the NCAS. She obtained her graduation degree and MSc degree from the University of Kelaniya and earned a PhD from the University of the West in California in USA. She is a pioneering research scholar in the field of fine arts, seeking the interconnectedness of art, society, culture, with a focus on not just Sri Lanka, but its neighbors in South and Southeast Asia. She teaches art and architecture of Sri Lanka, a number of courses on folk and urban theatre in Sri Lanka, folk and classical dance traditions of Sri Lanka and India, Buddhist art and architecture, India and Sri Lanka, non-Buddhist art traditions of India and South Asia, and so on, and has a long connection to many of the Buddhist places, centers of Buddhism in India. She has published 2 books, including The Buddha Image in Sri Lanka, An Independent Evolution, and has authored several papers and articles for reputed journals. She's a member of several renowned organizations, including the American Association for Religious Studies, the Royal Asiatic Society Sri Lanka, and the National Trust Fund Sri Lanka. She was director of the SARC Cultural Center at Colombo from 2020 to 2023. She contributes actively to the development of academic programs and research at the University of Kelaniya. With that introduction, I hand you over to Dr. Prashanthi Narangoda. Thank you once again, ma'am, for accepting our invitation, and it's over to you now.
Thank you very much. That warm introduction and the impression given to me and Mr. Shamaraman. And thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to do this talk, because I feel that I'm privileged and I am so honored to do it, because my subject area covers most of the time not only Sri Lanka, but also especially the South Asia, the neighboring India. So therefore, I hope and I believe that I have some sort of responsibility to share my knowledge and give my impression with regard to the commonality and the common characteristics of Buddhist art in Sri Lanka and South Asia in this regard. So therefore, thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity. When I saw the email at the very first instance, I thought it was a privilege. So the feeling is still the same. And I'm so proud and humbly thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge. Having said that, let me share my presentation with you. Actually, Mr. Shyam wanted me to speak about an overall, give a picture about Buddhist art and architecture in Sri Lanka. When it comes to Buddhist art, we all know that it has some independent characteristics, whereas there are some influential characteristics as well. Nevertheless, with regard to Buddhist art in Sri Lanka, we cannot forget the contribution made by India. It does not mean that India wanted Sri Lanka to have become a replica of Indian Buddhist art, but they generously wanted to have some kind of independent tradition of Buddhist art in not only in Sri Lanka, in each and every Janapadas, they spread Buddhism through the mission of Buddhism provided by the King Dharmashoka in the 1st century BCE. So with that, we will go for a bird's eye view of Buddhist art, how it was introduced to Sri Lanka and also evolved throughout the course up to date at some point with the political, socio-cultural, religious impressions and intrinsic kind of implications into those pieces of artwork. Before coming into the tradition of Buddhist art in India, I thought that it is a good idea to have a pre-Buddhist background to get an idea how the art and crafts and practices, customs and norms of Sri Lankan community was prevailed at the time of Buddhism arrived in Sri Lanka. So the pre-Buddhist background in Sri Lanka is pretty much similar to India, because most of the migrants from India professed Brahmanism, Jainism, mysticism, and also some ritualistic belief patterns in the country. So this chronicler information provides us many of the information that during the pre-Buddhist era, that means we basically distinguish the Buddhist era from the period of King Devanampiyathissa, during which period the most venerable Mahinda Thero arrived in Sri Lanka and introduced Buddhism to the country by the generous mission of the King Dharmashoka. However, it doesn't mean that the Buddhism was not in Sri Lanka before that, because we know that through the Great Chronicle of Mahavamsa, there is evidence to support that the Lord Buddha visited Sri Lanka during the 4th century BCE. There are 3 principal instances that the Buddha visited Sri Lanka according to the chronicler information. That is to the Adam's Peak, Mahiyangana, and Kelaniya. Adam's Peak means the Sri Padasthana, a place where the Buddha left his sacred footprint, and Mahiyangana and Nagadeepa as well. And therefore, when we talk about the pre-Buddhist background in the country, we should not forget that the visit of the Lord Buddha to the country are a period way before that Venerable Mahinda Thero arrived in Sri Lanka, and also before the arrival of the Prince Vijay as well. Because according to the myths, we know that the Prince Vijay arrived at the Tambapani on the very same day that the Lord Buddha's demise, the great parinirvana, happened. So that means before the Prince Vijay arrived in the country, the Lord Buddha had visited and introduced and inculcated some sort of Buddhistic practices in the country. And also it was polytheistic at the time when Buddhism was arrived in Sri Lanka for the second time. The pre-Buddhist background is therefore the Brahmanism, Jainism, mysticism. So you can see most of the religious background and the religious beliefs prevailed in the country, and the kings or the rulers of the country venerated them, respected them, facilitated them as well from one way or other. They provided buildings, shrines, and also food and amenities when and where necessary to those priests and monks and the community. It seems that the kings have facilitated all these religious groups and the religious communities equally and simultaneously. And this the brief introduction and the institutions established in the north and east, it says that the King Kandukabe, north of this cemetery, between and Pasana mountain, the line of huts for the huntsmen were built thenceforth. Huntsmen mean the hunters. Northward from thence, as far as the Gamini tank, the hermitage was made for the mentoring ascetics. Eastward of that same cemetery, the built house, the Niganta Jyotir. In that the same region dwelt the Niganta named Giri. This is where the King Vatagamini Abhaya later on built the Abhaya Giri monastery for the benefit of the Buddhist monks. Land and they are the land of the built also the chapel for the Niganta Kumband. It was named after him because he dwelt that premises. Toward the west of thence and eastward of the street of the huntsman lived 500 families of hermitage beliefs. On the further side of the Jyotir's house and this side of the Gamini tank, he likewise built a monastery for wandering mendicant monks. Those are perhaps the Buddhist monks who practiced by themselves during the period with the Buddha's teaching that they taught or communicated through oral tradition up until then, and dwelling for Ajivakas and the residence for the Brahmins. So that is how the pre-Buddhist background in the country when the Buddhism arrived during the 3rd century BCE with the arrival of the Venerable Mahinda Thero with the royal patronage of King Dharmashoka during the period when the King Devanampiya was ruling the country. And we need to see this Buddhist art, the introduction of Buddhist art to the country has 2 different perspectives. One is the political background, the other one is the religious background. With regard to the political background, we see the second coronation of the King Tissa of Sri Lanka was made according to the Mayuryan custom, which included the conferment of Ashoka's title, Devanam Priya to King Tissa. Then onwards, he became Devanam Priya Tissa. His name was simply Tissa. And after the second coronation, he became Devanam Priya Tissa. That is a political conferment of the similar majestic characteristics or qualities or powers or authorities to the king of Sri Lanka during the 3rd century BCE. And the second instance is the decision to send Sangamitta Terini with the Bodhi tree with 8 of the uncles of Mahinda and Sangamitta to take over the administration of the country. These 18 clans, guilds came to the country to introduce the administrative customs to the country. So now, therefore, we understand that the Buddhism facilitated us with not only art, but also with some political movement. The second influence is the religious background, because at the end of the delivery of Chullahatti Padopama Sutta, he demarcated the boundaries of the city, Sima, where Bandula Upasaka was bestowed with Pabbajja and Upasampada for the first time in the country. Because at the time when the most venerable Mahinda Thero arrived in the country, there were no monks who had that higher ordination or the Upasampada. So therefore, the first thing that the Venerable Mahinda Thero arrived in the country, he had to do the higher ordination to the minimum number of Buddhist priests, where he brought down to the Sri Lankan community, and he also demarcated the monastic boundaries for the monks who are going to practice as Buddhists, not only for the monks, Upasika as well. And then onwards established the first organic monastery or the dwelling for the monks of the country, Mahameghavanna Park or the Mahavihara. What we call today is Anuradhapura Citadel is belonged to this Mahameghavanna Park or the Mahavihara monastery. The Mahavansha says that he assigned the boundary marks on the furrow that the king had plowed and had assigned the boundaries for 32 Malakas, and for Tuparama, the great terror of lofty wisdom, then fixed inner boundaries. And we must encounter that this is the first planned building site of the country according to the literary evidence. Doesn't mean that Sri Lanka did not have any existing city plans. In the unrecorded oral tradition, we have the evidence that at the time when the Prince Vijay arrived in the country, there had been a local administrative system called Janapadas. So Sirasavastu and the Malwatu Oya area had different cities through which the Prince Vijay and his clans or the crowd occupied the administrative powers throughout the course. When the Kueni was left out from the city. Because there is a legendary behind that, but that I am not going to utter at this point. But there was a local administrative system at the time when the Prince Vijay arrived, when the venerable Mahinda Thero arrived in the country, because King Tissa was the ruler of that country. But the King Ashoka wanted to introduce its novel system to this country even during the 3rd century BCE. So that is a solid relationship between India and Sri Lanka. And these are the buildings that the most venerable Mahinda Thero wanted to erect by the King Devanampiya at his own discretion. Malaka with 32 stories, that's a 32-story building. That means the Sri Lanka had that building up of storied buildings. But this time it was supposed to be built for the duties of the Sangha. And site for the Tuparama to be constructed by the King Devanampiya in order to deposit the sacred relics of the Lord Buddha to be arrived from India in the near future upon his invitation from his father, the King Dharmashoka. According to the records, even today we believe that the Lord Buddha's original right collarbone is deposited at the relic chamber of this Tuparama stupa. That is one of the earliest stupas in the country, which we are going to talk about later on. And one with rooms for warm baths for the monks. A site for the southern branch of the Bodhi tree that was brought down by the Sangamita Therini later on. The opposite hall, place where gifts to the Sangha are distributed. A Chatusala or the refectory. The site for future Great Tupa or the Mahatupa. Now we call it Ruan Valley Sandagaba or the Ratnamali Chaitya, erected by King Duttagamini at a later date. So these are the Mahavamsa reports. And this is the town planning of ancient Anuradhapura city, somewhat which are still existing at Anuradhapura city. Like, for example, this Basavakulamba Lake and the Bulankulamba Lake, Isuramuniya, all these are there. This is where this whole area is belong to the Mahavihara monastery. This is the sacred Bodhi tree where it was supposed to be planted once it is brought. And this is the Abhayagiri Dagaba. This is the Lankarama Dagaba. Next to that is the Tuparama Stupa. So most of the buildings are still there, visible, that we need to encounter that the Buddhist architecture, that the existing architecture, I must say, the existed architecture during that particular period was converted into a style or a tradition of Buddhist architecture by the introduction of Buddhism by the most venerable Mahinda Thero to the country. And introduction of art to the country, the artistic background is a different perspective, because the venerable Mahinda Thero wanted, on top of everything, he wanted all the monks and the upasaka and upasikas to have common dwelling, to be moved from their secular life. Because if they are going to live a secular life, then the becoming a Buddhist makes no sense for them. So therefore, the most venerable Mahinda Thero always insisted that these Buddhist monks, upasakas and upasika need some separate dwelling. They should be common to all. It should not be a permanent dwelling for the monks. Any mendicant monk who is going to be a Buddhist or any other monk should have that kind of dwelling. So therefore, the Mahavihara monastery, Chaitya Pabbada monastery at Muhintale, this is the place where the most venerable Mahinda Thero first arrived at, and the Thuparama monastery to erect in order to deposit the sacred collarbone of the Lord Buddha, and the Bodhi tree shrine, a stone pillar to mark the site for future great stupa. That pillar is believed to be still there. It has been restored. We believe that is the original pillar, although reconstructed from time to time after the political influences kind of devastations anyway. And the Isaramanaka monastery, the Tissatag, Pratama Stupa, so far and so forth. All those things were built according to the needs of the Buddhist and Buddhism to establish the Buddha's teaching. So that is why there is a political background, religious background, and also an artistic background as well. So these are the city dwellings by the Buddhist monks and the upasakas and upasikas, because those were the places that they were given for the veneration of the Buddha. So these are these buildings, these icons have some symbolic, iconographic, and a semiotic value that we should not forget. All these stupas or tombs, all these things have some sort of a memory, some sort of a significance. The kings have made those architectural pieces so significant to the community and for the Buddhism and for the, we call it chirasthiti, the long life of the Buddhist teaching, Buddha's teaching. So I believe that these are the root causes and the stepping stones of establishment of Buddhism in the country as the royal and the majestic religion in the country. And following the path of the Buddha's teaching, the artists built monasteries or the religious buildings, we call it arama, during the period of King Devanampetissa and also the successive kings as well. And we understand today that there are 4 types of monasteries. Those are organic, Pabbata, Panchayatana, and Padanagara. Those have different qualities, architectural implications, and also some value with regard to Buddhism and Buddha's teaching. And when it comes to organic monasteries, it is very important to see that, know that these organic monasteries, by its name and the definition, coexisted with the existing environment. The artisan or the craftsman or the king did not want by any means to demolish the existing environmental elements in order to build a monastery for the monks. The reason behind is the philosophy of Buddhism to not to demolish the existing environment according to Buddha's teaching. Because according to Buddha's teaching in the Vinaya and Sutra Pitaka, it says, Arama Ropa, one Ropa. One of the good karmas is to grow the forests and monasteries for the monks. Arama Ropa, Vanaropa. Arama Ropa means to establish or erect monasteries for monks and to grow forests. So that is why we find many of the aramas in India during the Buddha's period. Veluvanarama, Jetavanarama, Goshitarama, so far and so forth. They all have a significance with some environment and eco-friendly establishments to those monasteries. So I suppose that the similar characteristics were embedded into the Sri Lankan organic monasteries as well. The first and the foremost example is the Mahavihara complex, where we see even today there is a big grown forest for the benefit of the monks and the community of upasakas or the disciples. And also utilize the caves and rock shelters for the living of monks. The existing shelters, the caves, were the dwellings for the monks. Even today we practice these things, like at Tantirimale we see these Buddhist caves. And one of the pioneering organic monasteries was the Mihinthale or the Chetyapabbata monastery. This is the place where the most venerable Mahinda Thero first arrived at. So this area, if you can see, there are so many Kaludiya Pokkuda monastery located at the Kaludiya pond. So where the monks who are residing in this monastery obtain the water for their basic needs from this pond or the tank. And this Madamaluwa monastery was erected in between the Lion Pond and the Naga Pond, because the kings and also the architect knew that the water is the most basic need. So therefore, all those organic monasteries were established nearby a tank, nearby a pond. Like the Mahameuna Uyana or the Mahavihara is close to most of the huge tanks like Basavakulama or the Nuwaravava, which we call today. If you visit, when you visit Anuradhapura, you may clearly witness how they have coexisted with the existing environment. And this is one of the significant organic monasteries. If you can see the setting up of this monastery, some of these are caves, and whereas the steps were very light steps were erected for the monks to climb up to the monastery. They did not demolish this existing elevation for any reason. So these steps and these elevations are still there, and also the cave dwellings are still there for us to have get an idea. And the Pabuddha Vihara was the very much of a conscious way of erecting the organic monasteries. So likewise, the well-planned and well-designed. They were very concise and compact. All the facilities were in a very close vicinity and a close compact area. Like if you can see here, provided with amenities for the monks, living spaces, bathing spaces, hospitals, lavatories, and public space as well. Because this actually was planned and established in order to provide all the facilities in close proximity for the benefit of the monks. Because at the time when the Buddhist community was growing unexpectedly and inspiringly, the kings were required to provide or facilitate more for the dwelling of the monks. So therefore, the kings had to take immediate actions to provide more dwellings and more facilities to the monks. And one of the very good examples of Pabbata Vihara is the Pankuliya Vijayarama complex situated nearby Anuradhapura city, but outside the citadel or outside the Mahavihara complex. So this is the stupa erected, and also around the vicinity there was a dwelling place erected for the benefit of the monks, and also an image house erected for the monks and for the lay community to venerate the Buddha and the Buddha's relics simultaneously. And Panchayatana is the newest one actually. This is believed to have Indian inspiration. I mean, no doubt, because during this period, the latest Panchayatana, not the latest, oldest Panchayatana architectural scape we find during the 4th and the 5th centuries in Sri Lanka. So by the time we know that during the history, the Indian migrants, Indian influence, Indian politics, culture, socio-religious influence was there so positively to help Sri Lanka to grow. And this actually, the Panchayatana monasteries were built with the structural scape of stupa, image house, and that image house was erected in the 4 corners of the stupa, demarcating the 4 guardian deities. Now, instead of or in place of the guardian deities in Hindu religion, the Buddhists used the image of the Buddha or the icon of the small stupa as 4 guardian spirits in the 4 major corners of the stupa. So that is why it is called Panchayatana actually. Stupa and 4 miniature stupas or the image of the Buddha at the 4 corners, it was called 5 elements. That is why it was called Panchayatana. So one of the well-known Panchayatana monasteries is the Lohapasada in Anuradhapura again. When you go to Anuradhapura and the sacred Bodhi tree, next to the Bodhi tree, you can see this Lohapasada or the brazen palace, as we call it in the Bell reports or the archaeological survey reports. Why it is called Brazen Palace? The person who discovered this place was the British governor Brazen. That is why it is called Brazen Palace. But it is Loha Pasada because it was built by using both rock pillars and the iron rods as well. So that proves that during this period, Sri Lanka had been using iron technology for erecting buildings, because this is originally a 9-storied building with a library, a refectory, chatusala, everything in one place. So, and these pillars you can see here around the main principal building was the evidence that the building was erected on the pillars with the solid foundation. And the Padanagara is the very significant mode of an architectural piece, a monastery, established outside the main city limits, especially for the monks who wanted to go on meditating and living alone in the forest. So forest monks, we basically call them Vanavasi in Sinhalese. The main building was erected on a rock surrounded by a channel of water. So very simple life, very solidarity, and also very isolated life was kind of paved by these monks who lived in the Padanagara monasteries. So we have several Padanagaras having very distinctive architectural characteristics. So wow, basically they had only 2 pieces. One is the meditating shrine and the pond. This is from Anuradhapura, and one of the finest example is the Ritigala Padanagara, where it was erected in a double platformed foundation. So therefore, the monks had the opportunity to walk around the pedestal while meditating, that we call as Chankamana Ghara, walking meditation. So those Chankamana Ghara was erected in combination with the meditating area. And also they had some very significant lavatory pedestals as well. I just put it here for your reference. They had the specifically erected lavatories and the covered system, and those wastage was gone to the river in the very far away from the place where they utilized water. And also the development of Bodhi Shrine is a very significant movement from the architecture of Sri Lanka, because they established Bodhi Shrines in various parts with the berries of the Bodhi trees sent by Ashoka along with Sangamitta Tereni. We know that she brought the main sapling from the southern branch of the principal Bodhi tree from the Indian Buddha Gaya, and also some other 36 seeds. So they all seeds, all those seeds were planted, and once the saplings came out, those sprouts were planted in several places of the country, of which we have now 8 remained. Jambukola means in Jaffna. The village of Tivakkagama means Tantirimale. The Thuparama Monastery, the Isaramanarama or the Isurumuniya that we call today, the first stupa where we cannot find it today. Chaitya Mountain means the Mihintale where the most venerable Mahinda Thero arrived for the first time, and Kajaragama and Chandanagama, along with other 32 Bodhi tree saplings sprung from 4 seeds. And this is the sacred Bodhi tree planted by the hands of the Sanghamitta Terine in the 3rd century BCE. And you can see the oldest branches are protected, safeguarded, even today, because this is identified as the oldest tree in the world today. Therefore, it has been protected with all kinds of medicine, and the treatments are given and always observed by the authorities. And the stupas are a very significant architectural piece with regard to Buddhist art in Sri Lanka, because there are several architectural identities, unique characteristics to Buddhist stupas in Sri Lanka. So this is the Mahathupa, or the Ruan Valley Sare, that you can see from a distance when you go to Anuradhapura. But a stupa is, we know that a heap or a mound that contains the relic of a sacred person. Similar to India, Sri Lanka also erected stupas. But we need to keep in mind that India did not enforce, or India did not see that the Sri Lanka is erecting stupas, clearly using the structure applied by the Indian artisan. Instead, Sri Lanka had developed its own architectural characteristics to build Sri Lankan stupa. That is the most significant characteristic of Buddhist art in Sri Lanka, despite the fact that it was introduced by India. That the Indian role, the role of India was very significant. And to me, I believe that it is so holistic. Because India wanted its neighboring states to grow independently, but with a very cooperative. So therefore, India helped throughout the course. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the other states. With regard to Sri Lanka, throughout this history, India has been helping, extending its hands to Sri Lanka to grow independently, so far and so forth. And these are the very first stupa structures in the country. This is the Girihandu Saya. You can see that the Girihandu Saya structure is very unique to it. There is a wall around the stupa that we can see it, and there is an inner round of pillars around the central stupa where the stupa is erected here. The stupa is pretty small, but the stupa has been covered by an entire ghara, or a house. That is why we call it Chaitya Ghara. There is a Chaitya in the middle, and there is a Gruha, or a house, erected to cover the entire stupa. That we can see throughout the history up until the 12th century, until the end of Polonnaruwa period. This is Girihandu Saya, and you can see it here. This is again part of Girihandu Saya here. And later on, they use this the stupa as a shrine room or an image house as well by erecting 4 images of the Buddha, directing towards the 4 main directions. So you can see one here, and when we go down later on, we can see some other stupas as well with the same structure and the same contextual elements. And this is the origin of the construction of stupa in Sri Lanka. You can see that this is the Tuparama stupa when it was erected at the very first time, and it was reconstructed by the succeeding kings, no doubt about that. But we see in addition to the Girihadusaya stupa, we can see the stupa at Mahiyangana, that of Nagadipa, and the Mutyangana and Kelaniya stupa have its significance and its own structural scale. And the antiquity to the stupa construction is here that I have mentioned briefly. Patamaka Chaitya was established by the King Devanampiyatissa. The legend says that he instructed his chief minister to erect a stupa within 2 days in order to have the higher ordination, because the most venerable Mahinda Thero did not want to wait until the Tuparama stupa is completed, because the next upcoming Vasa season has to be performed or observed. Otherwise, he was planning to go back to India. So king didn't want that to happen for any reason. So therefore, at the instruction of the most venerable Mahinda Thero, he instructed his chief minister to erect a stupa within 2 days. His minister will named after erecting this stupa as Kaludai. Again, the folklore says that chief minister became very dark-skinned once he burned the bricks in the kiln. By burning the bricks became black in color, because we know the wooden bricks have to go through a certain process to get in brown color. But since he had to do it very instantly, he did it very fast. So therefore, the bricks became black, and also the minister became black as well. Therefore, his nickname was Kaludai. Even today, its name is Kaludai. Kalu means Kala means the black. Dai means happened. So happened to be black is the Kaludai, the minister Kaludai. But anyhow, he erected this Patamaka Chaitya in order to perform the first higher ordination by the most venerable Mahinda Thero. And the Nivattaka Chaitya is the place where the Mahinda Thero turned back, where he decided to stay at Mahamega Park at night. And Mahatupa is the building that the King Duttugamanu erected with the relics, bodily relics of the Buddha received from India by King Dharmashoka, and also the Tuparama with the relics of the right collarbone of the Lord Buddha again. So those are the antiquity of the stupa, erection of stupa in the country. So this is the stupa of Tuparama, as you all may have visited, will see in future. So you can see the similar architectural scape utilized by both Suparama and Lankarama stupa. They are pretty much small in size. The architecture of the stupa is small, but there is a shelter for the stupa. That is the most important character of this stupa, early stupas in the country. We know that these existing architectural art and crafts were converted into Buddhist art with the introduction of Buddhism in the country. That is why we see these unique architectural scapes in the country other than the stupa architecture in India. Imagine the stupa architecture of Sanchi, Bharut, Amaravati, Nagarjunakonda. None of the architectural scapes or elements match with these architectural characteristics that we see in Thuparama, Lankarama, or other stupas erected in the country. That is the most generous component of India's contribution towards Sri Lankan arts and crafts. Because we all know that with regard to Asian art, India can be proud of being the great tradition. Nevertheless, India did not evoke any kind of duplication or replication of Indian art in any other territories. Sri Lanka is the best example, I suppose, with regard to stupa and also with regard to the image of the Buddha. Their inspiration is there with the fullest support and in its fullest strength, but Sri Lanka happened to that Sri Lanka has to have its own qualities, characteristics, and its independence, its identity all the times. This is the Mahathupa, as we can see. Now you can see from here to there, these stupas are pretty much small in size. Therefore, they were able to erect a shelter, what we call Chaitya Ghara. This is the remodeling structure made by Professor Senarat Paranavitana. By looking at these pillars and their angular shape, so he assumed that this is how the roof of the shelter of these stupas were built. But anyhow, when it comes to the bigger stupas like Mahathupa, we cannot see that shelter. Obviously, we cannot, because these stupas are huge. But anyway, it had some other characteristics that portrayed its identity into the best. So it is very significant that these bigger stupas with a bigger interior wall were painted with the illustrations of the Buddha. The King Duttagamini, according to the chronicles explanations, we can see that the King Duttagamini goes to decorate the interior walls of the relic chamber of the Mahathupa with the incidents related to the Buddha's life. And also he had instructed his artists to illustrate the Buddha in the human form or the anthropomorphic form, and also to color them in wrought gold as well. In the Great Chronicle, it says these were the incidents that he specifically wanted his artists to draw in the interior walls of the Mahathupa. The events during the 7 weeks prayer of Brahma, the setting in motion, the wheel of the doctrine, the admission of Yasa into order. Likewise, all incidents, important incidents denoting the life of the Buddha, maybe the Jataka stories, maybe the life during the period of Bodhisattva or the period before the enlightenment, and at the time of enlightenment, like the defeat of Mara and the preaching of the first sermon, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, and the other relevant stories as well. However, the king instructed the artisans to draw the image of the Buddha in the human form and also to color them in the color of the rose gold to make it glitter and illuminated among the other pictures of the wall. So, but I mean, you may have the question, why these paintings were drawn inside the walls? Because when the walls are closed, no one can see them. Why then? So someone can ask the question. That is the significance and that is the uniqueness of Sri Lankan art in the sense from its Indian brotherhood. So these are some relic chamber paintings from Kantaka Chaitya, Mihintale, and the Mahinda Stupa one is in the below. Demala Mahasaya at Polonnaruwa, you can see some illustrations here. If you can see it, interior walls. There is a big halo around, and in the middle you can see a line drawing of a Buddha or a priest in seated in the meditation posture, having two figures on either side of the image. It may not be clear to you, but that is there. When you go to the Mahayana Dagabha Stupa, you may see it clearly. This is what it is. From Mihintale, you can see it. And it is the very important to note that they are symmetrical. You can see the central line drawn in the middle from the top of the head through the nose down to the central point of the feet are located. And there are some angels also. These are the relic chamber paintings, interior walls of the relic chamber of the Kantaka Chaitya Mihintale. And these are some colored pictures found from Mahayana Stupa relic chamber. And you can see this Bodhi tree is colored by red and white and yellow and outlined by black. And you can see the image of a Buddha or a priest or someone under the tree. By the context itself, we can assume or we can come to a conclusion that this denotes the enlightenment of the Buddha Siddhartha Gautama under the Aswatha tree, which was later on named as the sacred Bodhi tree. And these are some deities. You know that from the Brahmaloka, all the gods and deities were listening to the lion roar of the Buddha at the time of his enlightenment, and they praised the victory of the Lord Buddha. So those belong to the Buddha's birth stories or Nidana Kathas. However, those have been very philosophically illustrated by the Sri Lankan artists in the interior walls. And this illustration depicts another coincidence with regard to the period of the King Duttagamini, where when he erected the Mahathupa, he instructed his architects to erect a pedestal by using 5 kinds of loha, means the minerals or the metals, and on top of which to erect a bodhi tree with jewels and gold and decorated with gold and jewelry, under which to be placed an image of the seated Buddha, which we will discuss later on. And so that has a significant correlationship to this incident, to that of the Mahathupa. And this is the typical structure of the stupa in Sri Lanka. It has some unique elements. The Bodhi tree, Salapatala Maluva, or the rock-built circumambulation area surrounding the stupa, Ayaka or Wahalkada, those are the 4 platforms projecting 4 directions from the radius of the stupa, and Vedika to hold the Upastamba. So this is the cross-section of a stupa in Sri Lanka, which is basically different from one we see at Sanchi or Bharut in India. And these are the examples of the typical stupas in Sri Lanka, because this is very unique to Sri Lanka actually. And this is the Wahalkad, if you can see this. This is also a unique architectural piece to Sri Lankan art, Buddhist art especially. Actually, these Wahalkada or the Ayakas or supporting pillars, actually the architectural piece was established to support the stupa to bear the weight of the garbha, because it was very heavy, and at some times it can come down or kind of collapse due to the unbearable weight. So therefore, this Vahalkada was a support from the 4 sides of the garbha. You can see this here. This is the Vahalkada that we saw from the front. So this is the profile. You can see from behind that there is a huge supporting wall to the stupa. And that is the importance of erecting Vahalkada, though it was pretty much a decorative piece from the front with all the motifs, crafts, and the carvings, engravings, and everything, and a shrine to put flowers to venerate the Buddha in the front of the Vahalkada as well. So these are all an integral part of the main stupa, as you can see it. Like the Mallasana or the flower pedestal, the Vahalkada, and the stupa. Those are interconnected to make its proportions very equal and to practically to bear the weight of the building. And these are some of the Vahalkadas for your reference. And the other unique architectural elements of Sri Lankan stupa is the guard stone, and the railing stone, and the moonstone of the pedestal. You can see it here. These are the very unique architectural elements of Sri Lankan Buddhist art. On either side of the steps towards the stupa, there is a tri-piece step embedding this moonstone, the guard stone, and also a railing stone. This is here, so that we call it. So these are the three elements here. Actually, you can see the personification of the cobra figure is here. You can see this 7-hooded cobra here, and also personified to a human figure. And also we can see the integrated characteristics of Indian art here. Like we can see the qualities, characteristics, or iconographic elements mentioned in Nishpanna Yogavali or Sadhanamala in here. Because some of them, either Mahayana Buddhist characteristics or Hindu religious characteristics, are clearly incorporated into the Buddhist architecture in Sri Lanka. But however, it is not a duplication. Again, I have to mention, it has made its own way, taken, inspired from Indian art, but considering the fact that these are the Buddhist shrines, so they got these Buddhistic characteristics into these personified cobra figures. The belief of cobra is coming from the pre-Buddhist area. You know that the Sri Lanka was having some 3 primary tribes, Yaksha, Naga, and Deva. That means Raksha, Naga means cobra, and Deva means gods. Those 3 communities were believing in those kinds of mystic religious beliefs. So therefore, they were called simply Yaksha, Naga, Deva. Probably those kind of pre-Buddhist beliefs and the Hindu and Mahayana Buddhist ideological waves incorporated into one masterpiece of guardstone in Buddhist art in Sri Lanka. And this is the moonstone here. And this has some significance that you can see here. 4 animals, elephant, bull, lion, and horse, are running consecutively one after the other. Actually, these 4 animals symbolically denote the different stages of the life of the Siddhartha Gautama. And also the innermost circle show the line of swans having some flowers in their beak. So this has been in the argument for so long, having different interpretations, having different philosophical arguments like that. But for me, I believe that this is one of the best pieces of architectural elements in Sri Lankan Buddhist art, because it similarly relates to the lay life and the religious life as well. And this is the railing stone. Also, again, this is, we call it Gajasingha railing stone. Why? Because the head of a lion and the trunk of an elephant is incorporated into this mystic animal figure. However, make it a piece of architectural element on either side of the steps towards the Buddhist shrine. Whether it is an image house or a stupa, these three pieces of architectural elements are interconnected and incorporated very symmetrically to give an artistic weave to the shrine. And during the Polonnaruwa period, some important revival occurred to the moonstone or the Sandakada Pahana. As you can see it here, the four animals walking one after the other in one semicircular pedestal have been moved to 4 lines. 3 lines here, one omitting. What is the omitted figure? Is the bull. This is the political amalgamation to the art. The Polonnaruwa period in Sri Lankan political history is very much significant because the influence of Hinduism, Hindu art, architecture, and the Hindu religious beliefs, especially the dance patterns, were introduced to Sri Lanka during the Polonnaruwa period. We see Nata Mandapa in Sri Lanka within the Buddhist monasteries during the Polonnaruwa period. And no one hatred. So that is the harmony and the reconciliation of life between the people, religion, and politics. The similar thing happened to this moonstone. In order to respect the Hindu religious beliefs, they removed the sacred bull from the moonstone. Why? Because they did not want that sacred animal to be part of this moonstone where people set their foot before attending into the shrine. But there are certain other interpretations as well. Anyhow, during the Polonnaruwa period, the image of the cow or the bull was removed from the moonstone. And also you can see the light motifs became deep engraves in the semicircular rock pedestal. And also the Buddha image became a very unique piece of artwork in Sri Lanka as well. And you can see this is the world famous image of the Samadhi Buddha or meditation Buddha. And I have given here the Nehru's interpretation or the impression towards this Samadhi Buddha image in Sri Lanka. I know nothing about art, Eastern or Western, and I'm not competent to say anything about it. I react to it as any untutored layman might do, because I'm just a layman. Some painting or sculpture or building fills me with delight or moves me and makes me feel a strange emotion, or it just pleases me a little, or it does not affect me at all and I pass it by almost unnoticed, or it repels me. I cannot explain these reactions or speak learnedly about the merits or demerits of work of art. The Buddha statue at Anuradhapura in Ceylon moved me greatly, and the picture of it has been my companion for many years. During the period he has been in the jail, He has been keeping an image of the Samadhi Buddha statue by his side. On the other hand, some famous temples in South India, heavy with carvings and detail, disturb me and fill me with unease. I do not, carry any kind of biasness through this expression of Jawaharlal Nehru, but just to sincerely mention the clarity and the serenity of the image of the Buddha is simply explained by the statement of the world-renowned politician, philosopher, Jawaharlal Nehru, a born Indian patriotist. And the erection of Buddha image in Sri Lanka has very unique embellishments, to say that. One is attributed to King Devanampiyathissa. That means during the 3rd century BCE, he has erected an Urusila Pratima, means a huge rock image of an standing Buddha, Urusila Pratima, which in the past was placed in the Tuparama by Devanampiyathissa. Actually, this mention is given during the period of King Jettathissa, where the 5 Indians invaded the country. So for the security of this Buddha image, the King Jettathissa has taken this huge rock standing image of the Buddha, made and placed by the King Devanampiyathissa to the monastery of Jettathissa Ramavihara. So therefore, this is a very important information for us to think about the erection of the Buddha image at an early period. And also, the second reference is found from Chronicle again, belonging to the period of King Duttagamini that I mentioned you earlier. He instructed his artisan to erect a pedestal on the throne, a cost whereof was 1 koti. Erected to the east of the Bodhi tree, he placed a shining golden Buddha image seated. The body and members of this image were duly made of jewels of different colors, beautifully shining. So this is the first reference of a seated Buddha image erected in the country. The problem is, he placed this seated Buddha image in the relic chamber where no one can see once the relic chamber is covered, because no one is going inside the relic chamber. Therefore, none of the persons can see that there is an image of the Buddha, similar to the paintings drawn as per the instructions of the king. So these two were very significant. And also the travelers' accounts are very important for us. By the side of the Tupe, he further built a monastery called Abhayagiri. This is with regard to the King Vattagamini Abhaya, or the Valagamba, where there are now 5,000 monks. In the Abhayagiri monastery, during the period when the Venerable Fahian visited as a traveler monk, were 5,000 monks. There is in it a hall of Buddha adorned with carved and inlaid work of gold and silver. There's a huge image of the Buddha, rich in the 7 precious substances, in which there is an image of the Buddha in green jade, more than 20 cubits in height. So you can imagine the size of the image. It's more than the life size. glittering all over with those substances and having an appearance of solemn dignity which words cannot express. So this gives an imagination of the quality and the representation of that enlightened person, the Lord Buddha Siddhartha Gautama, how the artisan has depicted this personality through the iconographic expressions. In the palm of the right hand, there is a priceless pearl. So that means in the palm, there is a pearl. The former, there is another reference, the former king in the country had sent to the central India and got a slip of the patra tree, which he planted by the side of the hole of the Buddha, that is the Bodhi tree, where a tree grew up to the height about 200 cubits. Now, at the time when the venerable visited the country, the Bodhi tree, the sapling had grown up to 200 cubits. Beneath the tree, there has been built a vihara, in which there is an image of the Buddha seated with the monks and the community of reverence look up to without ever becoming weird. And even today, when you visit the sacred Bodhi tree, this image house, and suppose the same Buddha image can be seen. That is very important to note that. So this happens during the 1st century BCE, and during that implies that by the time the 1st century CE, both the standing and the seated Buddha images were erected by the Sri Lankan artist. To give a fact or an evidence, archaeological evidence to the fact that the chronicler information is proved, Senarath Paralavitana, when he was doing his archaeological excavations in 1970s, found the gilt bronze-seated image of the Buddha from the relic chamber of the Ambasthala Chatya of Mahinda. It was in the devastated situation, plight during that period. So they need to take actions to restore the building premises and the stupa concurrently. While at the stage of restoration, he found this 6.5-inch high gilt bronze-seated image of the Buddha in the middle of the relic chamber, the ruined relic chamber, in front of which was a patra or a vessel upside down. So this is the inscription, seated in Dhyani Mudra. It is an excellent state of preservation and has to be counted among the most artistic Buddha images in metal so far brought light in Ceylon. Two other images of the Buddha, 2-inch and 2.25 in height, respectively modeled out of some kind of paste and covered with gold foil, were picked up from the floor. These evidently had been deposited in 2 of the niches. So this proves that the reference given to the Mahathupa during the period of King Duttagamini is not a fabricated story. There is some truth or a significance behind this story. And significantly, most of the Buddha images found from Sri Lanka, seated Buddha images found in Sri Lanka, are of the posture of Virasana and the attribute of Samadhi, and also in the meditation posture. You can see this is Abhayagiriya Samadhi Buddha image. This is Toluvila Buddha image. This is the Pura Sankulama Samadhi Buddha image. All belong to the similar period and having similar iconographic characteristics and attributes to portray the Sri Lankan identity of the Buddha image. So you can see some of the masterpieces also found from the Anuradhapura citadel and outside the area as well. This is a significant image of the Buddha found from Pankuliya Ashokarama, a Pabbata Vihara, and also believed that later on this monastery became a Mahayanic dwelling place. And the significance of this Buddha image is that this is the only image we find that the two hands are having two attributes, either Varada and Abhaya Mudra, or some other mudra in the right hand, because the right hand is half broken. Therefore, the attribute is not clearly recognized for us. But anyway, most of the standing images bear the attribute of Varada and Abhaya. Therefore, we can assume that this seated image of the Buddha is bearing the attribute of Abhaya or Varada in his right hand. So this is the close-up of the image. This is the only image of that kind. Other than that, 99% of the seated Buddha images found from Sri Lanka are from the Virasana and the meditation posture. And these are the very significant architectural pieces. Where are the stupa house, the image, and the image house is incorporated into one monastic building. While this one is Polonnaruwa Watadage, and this one is Madirigiriya Watadage, two significant Buddhist monasteries in the country. And as you can see, this image is, this is the Buddha image, located in here at the main entrance of the Watadage. Watadage means the surrounded. Vata means surrounded by a house. So surrounded relic chamber, Watadage. It's a compound word, surrounded relic chamber stupa. So that has 4 Buddha images facing the 4 directions, and also covered by a house or a shelter. So that is why they are called Ge. Ge means the house. So Vata means surrounded, Da means relic. So surrounded relic chamber house. And this one, this standing image is very significant. Why I put this stupa and these 2 standing images on either side is to inform you a very significant aspect of Sri Lankan Buddha image in connection with the stupa. Because we know that in Sri Lanka or in India, we do not see any standing images of the walking Buddha image. But in Sri Lanka, we find some kind of an algorithm is found in the stupa architecture when they erected the image of the Buddha in the mode of walking on par with the Buddhist stupas. We see this in 2 instances. One is at the Mahatupa or the Ruwanvali Stupa. The other one is at the Nilagiri Stupa at Ampara district, recently excavated and restored. So we have to go and see it. I have to go back. Why I'm telling this is that around this Mahathupa Salapatala Maluva or rock circumambulation part, these Buddha images were placed in equal direction. 6 of the standing Buddha images were placed in equal direction, 2 in terms of meeting with the people who are circumambulating around the stupa. The notion is that when you circumambulate around the stupa, it implies that when you pass one mark, one image of the Buddha, you do not see that. And then when you walk towards another 5 to 10 steps, you find another image of the Buddha. So likewise, you pass all these 6 images, assuming that a priest or a monk is meditating while walking around the stupa. That is the only instance so far we can find it. The other one is at Nilagiri. It's restored very recently. So 3 of the images are now on site, while the other 3 are located at the National Museum of Colombo in Sri Lanka. And similarly, there are some colossal images in Sri Lanka found in the carved and engraved in the natural rock with some philosophical connotation, like the Aukana Buddha image at Anuradhapura, near this Kalavawa or the tank, ancient tank, and also the Saserua Buddha image carved in the natural rock as a 3-dimension Buddha image. And later on, these Mahayanistic and the Hindu religious characteristics were embedded into the Buddha image. However, inculcating some unique characteristics into the Sri Lankan Buddha image. But still, it did not dissolve its chronological and unitary characteristics. Still, you can see, even though it is metal, gold-plated, but the attributes, the Varada and Abhaya Mudra in the standing Buddha image, and the Samadhi Mudra or the attribute of Samadhi or meditation in the seated Buddha image is not gone away. The important characteristic in the seated Buddha image is in here, if you can see it here, the double petal lotus as the seat. Like in the early seated Buddha images, you did not see any lotus pedestals. But here you can see the double pedestal lotus here set up for the seated Buddha image to showcase that the lotus is the symbolical semiotic icon of the purity, enlightenment, and so many other philosophical characteristics in religious art. And significantly, in Sri Lanka, we find Buddha triad. I also believe that this is, we see this during the Polonnaruwa period especially. I believe that this is also an influence from the Hindu religious practices, because always there is a divine triunity like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. When it comes to Buddhism, in the mortal Buddha, we see only one Siddhartha Gautama with the two disciples, with Shariputra and Moggalla. Some archaeologists and the historians assume this as the Lord Buddha and the two disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana. But some argue that if they are the two disciples, Sariyut and Moggallana, they cannot be put on a lotus pedestal. Therefore, this should be an image of the Buddha simultaneously, either from Mahayanistic perspective or from Hindu religious perspective. Because according to Mahayana Buddhist perspective, there can be some Swayambhu and Dhyani Buddhas like Amitabha, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Padmasambhava, like that. Also, according to Hindu religious beliefs, there are always triunity, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. So this can be some of the connotations related to that kind of inclination to the Buddha image as well, because we know that during the Polandarva period, we got so much of inspiration from the Hindu religious beliefs to the Buddhism and Buddhist art as well. And also we can see the pedestal of this image to your left is very significant. It has some rectangular pedestals, and again on top of it is a double petal lotus pedestal, on top of which is the standing image of the Buddha is placed. And to your right side, you see a standing image with the specific attribute, like we call it Paradukka Dukkhita attribute. And some people, some archaeologists believe that this is a figure of the Mahinda Thero, not the Lord Buddha. But however, we still did not recognize this as Mahinda Thero, therefore it still goes at the image of the Lord Buddha in the mode of compassion. Paradukka Dukkhita means to be worried at the time where the others are getting grieved or worried as well. And we see some reclining Buddha images in Sri Lanka as well. Depending on the location, we see that most of the reclining Buddha images were erected by clay and brick, whereas later on in Dambulla and in Pidurangala, we see some rock monolithic images of the reclining Buddha images. So we can see in Sri Lanka all kinds of Buddha images like standing, seated, walking, and reclining images by utilizing the artistic skills of the artisan of the period. And this is the most preserved brick reclining Buddha statue found from monastic complex of Pidurangala, close to Sigiriya rock monastery, kingdom. This is a little bit of a hard hike though. If one day you can visit this place, it's a very serene and very in a place where you can meditate upon that, even today. And one of the very significant places with regard to the Buddha statues cluster is Polonnaruwa, Galvihara, where you can see all these three kinds of Buddha images except the walking Buddha image. Like this one, as I mentioned you at first, as a Paradukka Dukkita Mudra. This is the reclining image. These are the two seated images consecutively. This one is outside the rock shelter. And this one is located within the cave that we call as Vidyadhara cave. And when it comes to Polonnaruwa, the tradition of image arts, image houses is very significant. As you can see it here, again, we can see this Hindu, the characteristics of Hindu religious buildings. Like we call it Dravida style, most popular in South India. You can see those motifs on the exterior walls, abundantly filled with decorative elements, belong to the religious beliefs. This is the Tuparama at Polonnaruwa. So you may have another question now. When we talked about the Anuradhapura period, we call Tuparama a stupa. Now here we call it Tuparama an image house. Why is it? So those questions may be raised at some point, because when it comes to Polonnaruwa period, we can see most of the image houses are built, huge image houses are built, not just simple image houses, and they are fully covered, and one high sky roof can be seen. This is Tuparama. Actually, this is called Tuparama because this building had a stupa on top of it. Both the shrine room and the stupa was built together upon one solid foundation. Within the shrine room, there were several images of the Buddha in seated or in standing mode. This is another image house, Lankarama image house at sorry, it's not here. It should not be Tuparam, it should be Lankaram. Let me correct it quickly. Lankaram, you can share it, right? You can see that.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You can go full screen.
All right, thank you. Okay. Right. This is the Lankarama image house again at Polonnaruwa. You can still see the Buddhist and Hindu religious temple characteristics are interconnected here. As you can see it here, the guard stone, the railing stone, the steps, and the moonstone is a little bit further here, up here. And the significance here is this building is followed, but with 5 stories, but only one roof on top of all the 5 levels. And from interior, you can see only 1 floor, but from outside, it has 5 levels, 5 elevations that one can see it as a storied building. Actually, there had been stories in the foreground, but when you go to the Garbhagriha or inner house, there was only one sector that elongated this huge Buddha statue all the way to the rooftop of the building. This is a very significant building structure and also depicting a very specific architectural technology that we can see in one building that is at Polonnaruwa. And this is the Tivanka image house. Again, you can clearly see that Indian characteristics have been incorporated into the image house. This is the Tivanka image house. So you can see all those blind doors, windows, architectural and sculptural elements are engaged with all those beams and pedestals and everything. So if I'm going to explain this in detail, we can see those individual and collective characteristics that we can see in Hindu architecture clearly. But inside the building, everything is about Buddhist. Also, the outer walls depict the incidents or any stories belong to Buddha's birth stories or contemporary incidents or simply the decorative motifs or any other thing. And we go for paintings from cave to the temple because these temples all have some paintings, but they are hailing from typical Buddhist caves that we can see here. Some of them are, I'm just showing it to you. Gonagolla cave temples, Kotiyagala, and Kudagala cave paintings. So they show some stories from the Buddha's life, either enlightenment. This is the birth of the Prince Siddhartha, like the dream of Queen Mahamaya. Here it is another incident related to Buddha's life. And here a deity or a bodhisattva is looking at somewhere we cannot figure out because they are scattered today. And some of the Buddhist cave paintings now we can see here. It's evolution. Now they are having some textured walls and paintings. So, and clearly the classical figures are, we can find from Sigiriya cave paintings. Actually, at Sigiriya, we see these kind of single motifs, single paintings, and the duets as well. And the significance is that regardless of whether they are single images, single paintings, or duets, no two images are similar in context and iconography. There is some uniqueness in each image that we cannot compare to at any time. Because those are individually drawn, individually colored, therefore they are individual in its appearance and in its connotation as well. You can see the colors here, mostly used yellow and gold in here in one type of figures, and blue and some light pink colors in the other darker female figures. So this also has different interpretations. which I am not going to illustrate before you, because we are talking about the Buddhist art, how it has become an integral part of the Buddhist art is a matter. Now you can see these are semi-secular. Because this we can see in the Sigiriya, that is the kingdom of the King Kashyapa. It's not a monastic building. But the figures indicated in here are not in any way denoting any secular context, whereas they are denoting some sort of a religious context. All these females are having flowers in their hand. This lady has a tray of flowers, whereas this lady has flowers in her hand, in two hands, and she is bearing flowers again, holding hands, and this one is having another pot of flowers, different than this one, flowers. So therefore, it shows that they are going for some religious activity, religious task. Therefore, these are semi-secular paintings. But when it comes to Tivanka image house, a similar stylistic characteristics have been incorporated into the temple paintings, as you can see it here at the Tivanka image house. And totally grown into a different perspective, paintings of the Temple of Tooth Relic shows a different mode of characteristics, stylistic, thematic characteristics, so far and so forth. As you can see it here, this is the sacred Kandy Asalapirhara, like the world famous Asalapirhara, has been drawn in the walls of the Temple of Tooth Relic. And this is a historic involvement from the period of Kandyan kingdom even to date. So therefore, all those incidents have been in the context of temple paintings during the 17th to 19th centuries. And this is the incident of bringing the sacred tooth relic by Prince Danta and Princess Hemawala all the way from India to here. So that is how the temple paintings have been evolving throughout the period. Now these 19th century paintings can be seen at the Colombo downtown Bellanville Sacred Temple. Like you can see here, some of them, this is the Prince Siddhartha's palace, where the females are coming towards him to please him at the instruction of the King Suddhodana, to please him and to keep him happier in order to get him away from departing from his secular life. But however, he renunciated at the end. And this is also one incident from his life, secular life. But that is, we call it 4 pre-incidents of his life before going for the departure, great departure. So that is how the Sri Lankan Buddhist art began and evolved throughout the period. So I just wanted to give a bird's eye view about the Sri Lankan Buddhist art. Thank you so much once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Prashanthi, for this excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
It is, very, very informative. It is a very broad sweep of an extraordinary amount of information that I think most of us are, seeing for the first time. We are We have seen some references, studied some essays or something. Really, the Sigiriya pictures are the only ones that, mostly we are familiar with, or,
Exactly.
some photos of the Anuradhapura, the Temple of the Tooth, and so on. That's mostly what are Kandi and whatever, some monuments. But this extraordinary history from before Mahinda, before Vijaya, that is, that was a treat for the eyes. So I hope you have time for a few questions from.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we can leave the presentation on if you wish. Or you can stop sharing and we can just talk.
Yeah.
So there is an enormous number of questions. There are quite a few questions from different viewers. Let me go into the very first part and ask a very simple question, because you talked about the pre-Buddhist cultures and the Brahmins, the Jains, the Ajivikas. Most people don't even know about the Ajivikas here. So I was kind of interested that you talked about them. Are there only literary references about these other, migrants of different faiths and beliefs from India?
No, even today we have some similar communities that we find them in different in mendicants. But we do not have any clear reference to say that they were the same Ajivakas they have been evolving to date. But the chronicler reference says that during the period of King Pandukabaya, there had been different religious sects. For each of them, the king had equally treated and facilitated dwelling, food, and everything.
Are there only literary references? Are there any monuments or of the other cultures, those other religions?
There are some monuments as well, like tombs and some caves, because there are some prehistoric caves where these stick figures, some symbols, icons that are not related to our capacity or the known history.
Okay.
So
I mean connected to Ajivikas or Jains or pre-Buddhist settlements.
They are pre-Buddhist settlements.
Okay.
They're pre-Buddhist, yes.
Okay, but they're prehistoric, not necessarily of the religious.
Yeah, they can be pre-Buddhist as well.
Okay. So let me ask another question. Except for the, until you came to the Mahaparinirvana in that, I could see only Buddha images. Whereas if you visit places in India like Sanchi Stupa or the stupas in the museums, like in Madras, we have the Amaravati Museum Gallery or the Barhut you see a lot of the Jataka stories depicted. You see a number of episodes of not just Mahaparinirvana, but a number of episodes of Buddha, the miracle in Rajagraha, the miracle at Sravasti, his birth, his
motives.
Motives. Huh?
Yeah. So, we do not see. No, we do not have.
Don't see those in Sri Lanka.
No, we do not see. We do not have.
Okay. So the other
only symbol we have is the sacred footprint as a symbol, but it's still also not denoting the Buddha. It is just a piece of decorative element to show that you are entering into a sacred place.
Okay.
Other than that, it is not a symbolic form, like an iconic form.
Okay. And you mentioned that one of the kings ordered that the paintings be painted inside the stupa where it cannot be visualized. But is the stupa hollow or is it filled up? I thought it was just piled up a dome, the dome of the stupa, right? It would be piled up, right?
Dome, actually the dome, the inner stupa.
Okay.
Interior wall of the dome.
You did mention that people cannot go and see it.
No, no one can see it.
Right. So it's very interesting.
Thing, it's very significant,
So the painting was a religious offering, not really for artistic.
No. It's an offering by the king to to decorate the interior wall of the chamber.
Right. Right. And I was very impressed by the statement, things like the Loha Pasada, using metal and all that.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, so we don't have many. So because when we study Indian art and architecture, especially from Tamil Nadu, in Tamil Nadu when we study it, we see only stone architecture from the 6th century or the Pallava period or so. Whereas here you are seeing much older monuments in Sri Lanka and all that. And also the architecture was, you could see it's there may be the guilds and all that traveled. We didn't know about that part of it. But they developed a unique architecture, because I couldn't relate, because I have visited some of us in PhD and others, of course, have visited several of this. You've seen lectures and illustrated pictures, and some of the stupas and the other monuments look very different. I mean, the decorative elements on the stupas, until you showed that very late one, which looked like, very decorated. You could see late Chola or, Vijayanagar era period, that a lot of features. Except for that one, everyone looked, very, very uniquely Sri Lankan. So
Very
because we don't,
unique, yeah.
that was fascinating. So there are some others that have asked certain other questions. The brick stupas, Badri's question is, brick stupas seem very old, possibly before the Christian era. Is this true? Is that, but some of the images seem to be of a later era, 6th century or later. Are the stupas much older than that? Is it from the Mahinda period itself?
Yeah. The Pratamaka stupa that I mentioned and the stupa Rama belong to the period when the most venerable Mahinda Thero arrived at the country.
Okay.
Because that was the first stupa established.
Right. Okay. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, ask about, and a couple of people have sort of mentioned it. You even mentioned about the images, not just of images of the Buddha himself, but we study that in history, the Buddhist history, the early philosophy was Theravada, where you did not depict Buddha in human form, but you depicted him as the Bodhi tree or the Dharma Chakra or something like that. And only much later, the Mahayana period, a few centuries later, you see. Does that mean that the Mahayana, because I don't know if independently Mahayana developed there. I think it developed in India and it traveled, the ideas.
Actually, there is an argument, like, the argument first brought to the light by French scholar Fouché, saying that the India developed the Buddha image with the Bactrian influence, the Greco-Bactrian influence in Gandhara.
I heard that. Yes.
That is during the 1st century CE.
Right.
But that is as idol worship, a place of image worship. They found the Buddha as an icon of worship. But in the Theravada Buddhist practice, the image worship was not a practice, because it's a mortal Buddha, and he entitled himself by the ordination and also by having the kind of causal effect, right? So therefore, the image worship was not encouraged by the Theravada Buddhist practice. That is why in Sri Lanka, the Buddha image was created not as an icon of worship. It is an icon of, it's a kind of a model for the priest and the layman to follow. That is why the King Duttagamini Abhaya placed a seated image of the Buddha inside the relic chamber. But no one can see, after all, no one can see that.
Right.
The only instance we can see that the image placed by the King Devanampiyatissa as part of the Thuparama monastery, which was moved to some other monastery by King Jettatissa for the security by the invaders. So that has been placed in the monastery for the priests to look at it as a model, because they wanted a person, because there was no other person to make a similar appearance to the Buddha. So
Okay.
therefore, the King Duttagamini also and King Devanapeti instructed to make a Uru Sila Pratima, means the
Right.
huge, because according to the Lakkana Sutta, the Buddha has the 32 characteristics of a great person.
Okay.
That is Mahapurusha Lakshana.
Right.
So
Okay.
those Mahapurusha characteristics of a Mahapurusha, of a great man, cannot be seen in a person like us.
Right.
So King Devanapati instructed his artisans to embed those 32 characteristics of a great man and install it in the monastery of Suparama for the monks to get the precedence and to do their meditation practices.
Okay.
So that is how the actually in the Sri Lankan context, the image of the Buddha is older than what was erected in Gandhara. That I have found in my PhD thesis actually.
Okay.
So yeah, in the iconographic and all those characteristics, I got to know that the image of the Buddha in Sri Lanka is older than what was made in India.
Wow, that's
But
amazing. Okay.
yeah,
Right.
the Buddha in India has been erected in Mathura in the form of a yak. Bhagavan, the worship, Bhagavan Yaka is the mortal Buddha. Because
Okay.
for them, the worship of Yaka was very popular in Mathura.
Right.
So for them, Buddha was also a person belonged to the Yaka clan. Therefore, the Bhagavan was the person who is bestowed. They made the image of the Buddha in the form of a Yaka. So they did not imply those characteristics of a great man as mentioned in the Lakkana Sutta. So that was the difference. They had the Buddha, but not as we see it.
So the philosophical difference actually influences the artistic depiction also.
Exactly.
I see. So on a related question, one of our viewers, Sri Gururaj, asks, as per Buddhist tradition, when is a standing Buddha installed? When is a seated Buddha installed? Are there any Buddhist specific agamas that guide these, what should be installed?
Like in Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first Buddha, seated Buddha image was erected during the period of King Devanapati, as I mentioned before.
Right.
And the first image of the seated Buddha image was erected by King Duttagamini during the 1st century BCE, but both of which were not made for the image worship, not for worship.
Okay, no. The question I think was why. The question I think was what chooses the king or the monastery or a sculptor to depict Buddha seated versus standing. What is the difference? Why this one choice? Is there any philosophical thing guiding that or agama?
It's not a philosophical, I think, philosophical understanding, but in a pedestal made of one koti, the king instructed to place a seated Buddha.
Right. Okay.
It's an artistic view, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Badri has asked another question. Buddha's visits to Sri Lanka and Vijaya's arrival seem to be mentioned in Mahavamsa only. But the arrival of Mahinda, because you're talking about Buddha visiting Sri Lanka, and we don't have any, that seems to be the very exclusive to Mahavamsa, because Indian historians are most
I know
it did not travel outside.
It can only be found from Mahavamsa.
Yeah, okay.
It's
because
only recorded in Mahavamsa.
Okay.
Other than that, no one knows the Buddha's visits to Sri Lanka.
Right. Yeah, a similar story, I think, for Amaravati. They say he visited.
Exactly. There, and also one painting at Ajanta. Buddha's visit to Sri Lanka is there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Which one is that?
one painting is there.
Okay. Okay. I'll get a reference from you later. You mean as the Jataka because there is a Simhalavadana Jataka. You mean that? Because that is the story of a Bodhisattva visiting Sri Lanka, a Simhalavadana.
That is a later version of the Bodhisattva. Sihalavadana is a later version.
Okay.
Where after the introduction of Mahayanism into Sri Lanka.
Right. So you mentioned almost substantially, mostly literary references. But do any of these monuments, stupas, or even the images themselves have any inscriptions? Have there been copper plates or something like that found?
Yeah. There are inscriptions.
Okay.
If we can see the Senrat Paranitana's inscriptions of Ceylon, CDs at Vikram Singha's Epigraphia Salonika. So there are certain inscriptions, a lot of inscriptions.
Okay. Now I'm curious because one of the other things that historians say is that Tamil, for example, there is literary evidence. Fahiyan, you mentioned, right? He came to, not Fahiyan, but Hyun Sang came to Tamil Nadu, came to Kanchipuram during the Pallava period. And he mentions that there are a lot of Buddhist viharas, some Buddhist monks there. And Mahendra Pallava himself mentions that there are Buddhist monasteries there. But today we find no evidence of any Buddhist monastery or stupa in Tamil Nadu. So we find them in Andhra Pradesh, north of it, Orissa, in some other places. I'm just curious. Are there references to Indian monasteries or places like this in Sri Lankan inscriptions or copper plates or any such thing?
Yeah, there are. In Vijayarama, there is a copper inscriptions. Some with some Dharani inscriptions. There are some. Yeah. And also, don't you have that the second decimal inscription that mentioned that Sri Lankan monks, Sihalarama?
I'm not individually familiar with it, but maybe it's more, well-known.
Yeah, there is a second, the Bodhimitta, the Upasika Bodhimitta has donated that monastery Sihalarama to the 500 monks visited Sri Lanka.
Okay. No, I'm sure there are travel back and forth because, that I think is there.
They were a mission, and they also got the Buddhist religious mission towards 16 Janapadas. Inscription with me. Second digital inscription.
Okay. So I'm looking for more questions. I also had a kind of a personal kind of an interesting one observation about you showed about the Ishur Muniya stupa, and then I've seen a photo of that. There is a sculpture of like two elephants or something like that there. And that I saw some references that it was contemporary to the 6th, 7th century Mahabalipuram monuments. One person makes a reference to it.
Man with a horse head.
No, there is a sculpture. My question is this: is the Ishuri Muniya's site much older? Is it, what period is it?
It's older. Ishuri Muniya hails from 1st century BCE.
Oh, okay. So much older.
It's very old.
Because there is one story related that one of the princes of Sri Lanka came to India to seek Narasimha Pallava's help because he was defeated. Narasimha Pallava sent a navy to help him. I think Manavarman or something. Manavarman, I think. And
Manavamba, the king Manavamba. Yeah.
Right. So on that there is one scholar called Michael Rabe who establishes a connection between sculpture here, a Hindu sculpture here called Arjuna's Penance, and the sculpture at Ishuru Muniya. So they are supposed. So if the Ishuru Muniya website is actually much older, then the sculpture may have been added much later. So I was just curious.
Probably, yeah, because it has a long history and it has been evolving with the great tradition as well, and also some because those religious interrelationships are growing, and those blendings are obvious.
Yeah.
Inspirations are obvious.
So yeah. So I'll just read out a couple of these comments, and I think we are coming to close on time. We have gone for a long time. We'll close it to I just want to read some very complimentary comments that have come through this that may go away, so I'll read them. She's such a learned person, very modest, enjoying the profound knowledge being shared by the speaker. Wonderful talk, good photos to elucidate. Very informative session, very impressive. So much, thank you so much for an elaborate lecture on the Buddhist architecture. Moonstones are present in Nagarjuna Konda, etc. And very people are very appreciative of the breadth and depth of the scholarship behind the lecture.
Thank you so much.
So I just thought I'd mention those. So thank you very much. It was a wonderful lecture. It was delightful to have you here. It's a very different lecture we have, because we've had some lectures on Buddhist art before, but this is it was very different. So thank you so much for the.
I don't know. Thank you very much. So
thank you so much for
that opportunity. So it's a simple pride for me to share with my knowledge.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
End our stream with this, and we can stay on. You can stay on and chat for a couple of minutes if you want. But we are